Hello, my dear friends. You're in the Military with Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 14th of September of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first, we're going to talk about Kiev. We have a lots of very interesting statements and pictures from this area. Ukrainian channels are warning that Russia is preparing for a massive strike on Ukraine's energy and gas sectors. I would like to remind you that during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians carried out another massive attack in the central part of Russia. And as a result of this attack, another oil refinery of the Russian Federation was damaged. And now the Russians most likely are planning to strike back. And obviously, we believe that this is going to be the biggest attack since the beginning of the special military operation. Another important statement is that in 2026, Ukraine's needs for military purposes will amount to 120 billion or 172 million per day. In this regard, according to representatives of the Ukrainian government, Ukraine's defense budget must be doubled. We know that Ukraine doesn't have money for this, so most likely Ukraine will get money from the Western countries. Another important video. Here we can see a footage from the scene of an emergency in Kiev region where ammunition detonated at night and damaged the railway track. So no drones or missile strikes were recorded in this area. So the Ukrainian sources are trying to say that that was something like a sabotage operation carried out by the Russian forces. So a very huge explosion was recorded and ammunition detonated at night and damaged the railway track. So most likely the Russians will use these operations in future more and more. Now let's move to the ground and let's discuss the situation along the line of combat contact. And first, let's talk about the Zaporizhzhia direction. During the previous 24 hours, a lot of changes once again were recorded, but this time not just in the area of the responsibilities of the group of forces East, but also in the area of responsibility of the group of forces Dnipro. According to information we have, as a result of offensive operation, the armored forces of the Russian Federation managed to enter the southwestern part of the settlement by the name of Stepnogorsk. Currently, there are very heavy clashes. The Ukrainians are trying to force the Russians to fall back with FPV drone attacks. The Ukrainians are hunting and destroying Russian positions. At the same time, the Russians are trying to dig in deeper. So the clashes for the settlement has begun, and now it's very important for the Russians to force the Ukrainians to fall back further in the northern direction and to take the city of Stepnogorsk under complete control. If the Russians are able to do this, then as we discussed, the Russians will be able to begin offensive operation from the west in the eastern direction along this dense network of the fortification that leads right to the city of Orekhov. And using these routes of attack, the Russians at the end will be able to answer the city of Orekhov from the west. So let's wait and see. Now let's discuss the situation in the eastern Zaporizhzhia direction. During the previous 24 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded. Just yesterday, the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Novonikolaevka. And the Russians published the video about this, how Russians were bombing and attacking this settlement. And at the end, we can see several flags that were raised in different parts of the settlement. And today, pro-Ukrainian resources reported that now the Russians began offensive operation in the direction of the settlement by the name of Nova Ivanovka. Once again, this information was reported by pro-Ukrainian resources. According to videos that were published during the previous 24 hours, we see that the Russians have already begun clearing operation. The Russians attacked temporary deployment points of the armored forces of Ukraine with drones. The Russians are trying to hunt and to destroy Ukrainian FPV drone crews, and the Russians are trying to find machine gun positions. So most likely in a day or in 2 days, the Russians will take the village under complete control. Furthermore, according to several pro-Russian resources, the settlement by the name of Berezova was also taken by the Russians by the end of the 14th of September of 2025. The Ukrainians were forced to fall back. As you can see, the Ukrainians are showing less and less resistance to the armored force of the Russian Federation. But later, probably a few hours after this post was published, the affiliated channels with the group of forces east stated that there are still clashes for the settlement of Berizoa, and the affiliated channel asked not to run before events, not to be in a hurry, and to allow the Russian troops to do their job. So anyway, we believe that maybe by the end of the 14th of September of 2025, the village of Berezova hasn't been taken by the Russians, but we believe that tomorrow the village will be taken and the group of forces east will publish additional video, another video of the village of Berezova and the village of Novonikolaevka. So let's wait and see. Obviously, the things are heading up. Now let's talk about the western Donetsk direction. As you can see, we changed the color of this territory in Russian favor. This territory used to be considered as the territories under complete Ukraine control as several days ago, but later pro-Russian resources and neutral mappers reported that the Russians counterattacked and restored control over the territory. We discussed this yesterday, and today the territories were colored in Russian favor completely based on the video published by the Russian sources. In this video, we can see how Russians raised their flag on the territory of farms of the village of Iskra. So this is the village of Andreevka Klivtsova. In the second part of this video, we can see how Russian stormtroopers were running and clearing the village of Zelený Gai. So the Russians counterattacked and restored control over both villages. I would like to remind you that Ukrainians counterattacked in this area in the second part of August, and as a result of Ukraine counterattack, they managed to get the village of Tolstoy. But later Ukrainians stopped because they see no point in this counteroffensive operation. The main purpose of that August counterattack was to stop the Russians in the area of the cities of Gulyai-Pole and Alexandra Pokrovsk. But Ukraine counterattack didn't stop the Russians. At the same thing, the Russians intensified their offensive. So the Ukrainians stopped their counterattack and were forced to fall back on the Ukrainian side of the river of Volcha. And now the Russians restored control over the territories they lost. So this is the situation in this area. Now let's move to the Pokrovsk direction. The Russians and the Ukrainians continue very heavy clashes for the, area of breakthrough. The Ukrainians are trying to improve their positions around the city, the village of Vladimirovka. The Russians are doing their best with the purpose to answer the city of Mirnograd from the east. So let's discuss everything in details. Today we got a very interesting video published by Ukrainian sources, and here we can see how Ukrainians were bombing Russians that were moving along these tree lines to the east of the city of Mirnograd. Based on this video, we adjusted this dense network of fortifications and this stronghold under complete Russian control. So this is the situation by the end of the 30th of September. This is the situation by the end of the 40th of September. It's very difficult to understand what exactly is happening here. We can see lots of strongholds, lots of shelters, lots of defense positions of the armed forces of Ukraine. We got lots of geolocations of these Russians' breakthrough. So very complicated situation. We got lots of videos from the Novoekonomichna. So obviously there are very heavy clashes, but the Russians are trying to do everything they can with the purpose before cold comes to enter the city of Mirnograd, especially and most likely the southern part. We believe that the battle for the southern part of the city of Mirnograd is going to start very soon. This is going to be most likely a major offensive operation without counting losses because Russians need this territory. Russians need the city under their legs because without city under their legs, it will be very difficult to fight with Ukrainians during the cold period of time during autumn and winter. As for the northeastern flank of the Pokrovsk agglomeration, during the previous 24 hours, additional changes were recorded in Ukraine's favor in the vicinity of the settlement of Vladimirovka. Russian soldiers published this video of how Russians were attacking Ukrainians with FPV drone. So this episode took place exactly in this area. Based on this video, we made small correction of the map. So we continue receiving more and more updates that Ukrainians are trying to counterattack in this area with the purpose to restore control over the area of Russian breakthrough and to force the Russians to fall back. And of course, the Ukrainians want to encircle Russians, but I'm not sure that Ukrainians are able to do this. As for the city of Kostyantynivka, during the previous 24 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded in the southeastern pocket. So this area has a very huge dynamic. since the beginning of 10th of September of 2025, we made a lots of changes and lots of corrections on the ground in the Russian favor. So this is the situation by the end of the 14th of September. Most likely, the southeastern pocket was completely eliminated by the Russians, and the Russians answered the residential part of the city of Konstantinovka itself. So now the Russians most likely during the next several days will continue a clearing operation. They will try to improve their logistics to bring additional forces to concentrate a critical mass, and most likely right after this they will try to finish the battle for these dachas, for this residential area. And after the end of the battle for the residential area, the Russians will move their focus to the Kliban Bug area with the purpose to finish the battle for this territory as well. And only then we may wait for the beginning of a major offensive operation in the direction of Konstantinovka. As of now, the Russians will try to maintain positions around the city, but not on the territory of the city itself. Another important thing is that Ukrainians, while the Russians are attacking Ukrainian positions, the Ukrainians are trying to improve their logistics. They're building more and more roads with the protection nets. Hundreds of kilometers were already covered by Ukrainians, and they continue this process. We understand that we are entering completely different stage of the special military operation. And if you remember at the beginning of this year, I told you that during the next stage of the special military operation, both the Russians and the Ukrainians will invest lots of money to these protection nets, defense nets, trenches, strongholds, and fortifications, not just along the line of combat contact, but all over the entire territory of Ukraine and the territory under control of the Russian Federation. As for the Syria's direction, there are very heavy clashes for this area, but without changes on the ground. The Russians continue hunting and destroying positions of FPV drone operators of the armored forces of Ukraine. They try to find launching points, the temporary deployment points, and according to videos that we have received since the beginning of August, the Russians are pretty effective with this. This is the second episode during the day how Russians managed to discover another position and then attack this territory with artillery. This is another position. So every single day, 4-5 videos Russians published about how they hunt and destroy Ukrainian FPV drone operators. Furthermore, according to information we have, according to very reliable pro-Russian resources, as a result of clashes and as a result of offensive operation, the armored forces of the Russian Federation managed to answer the village of Yampol itself. We are talking about these facilities. This is something like a farm, but this is already something like a Yampol village limits. So the Russians answered, and this is the beginning of a very critical and disaster situation for the armored forces of Ukraine. The Russians most likely will continue offensive with the purpose to take the village of Yampol under complete control. And from these positions, the Russians will be able to attack Ukrainians in Siversk from behind and to attack Ukrainians in Liman from the behind as well. As for the Kupiansk direction, during the previous 24 hours, lots of attacks and explosions were recorded on the territory of the city of Barova. This is the main city of this direction. As I understand, according to information we have now, the Russians are trying to cut the city of Barova from supply and support. They bomb and attack this territory with FABs. This is the main base of the armored forces of Ukraine, where they concentrate their units, first of all, of 3rd Assault Brigade. The Russians were very focused, as you can see, during the previous 24 hours. Most likely, in coming days, the Russians will try to attack Ukraine positions. As for now, we see that most likely the Russians will try to continue their offensive operation towards the river of Oskol on the line of attack between the river of Nitrius and the settlements of Korovy Yar, Vovchiri, and Rubtsi. If Russians are able to take this territory under complete control, they will reduce Ukrainian logistics in the city of Barova till the minimal level, which obviously will lead at the end to complete collapse of Ukrainian defense of the Barova pocket, and Ukrainians sooner or later would be forced to fall back. We see that the Russians are trying to do the same thing with the Barova direction as they managed to create with the Kupiansk direction. As for the Sumy area, according to information we have during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians managed to improve their positions and to recapture some territories around the village of Kondrativka. This information was provided by pro-Ukraine resources as of the end of the 14th of September without any proofs from reliable resources and from different videos. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.